Scott and I were seeing this woman a few weeks ago, and we were at dinner, and she was like, I'm ADHD, and I have autism, and I have this, and I have that. And she was like, and Jen, you do too. And I was like, what? So I'm wondering if even some of us that are not like we think we're neurotypical, but we're not, like, how do you even know? It might actually make a difference in this is why your love life feels frantic, or this is why your sex is not working. Hey, I'm Jen, host of the Open Bedroom podcast, where you'll find topics of sex, dating, relationships, non-monogamy, and more. I'm glad you're here. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Open Bedroom podcast. You guys are going to notice I have Dr. Allie back on. She has been on episode 202 just recently. We talked about navigating different libidos and what do you do when one of the partners has a lower libido and one has a higher, and how do you turn them on? And oh, that was such a yummy episode. And we had her over a year ago on episode 150, Champ Quality Pussy Pleasure. And that was such a yummy episode where we did a lot of sex education and what do you do with a vulva and how do you please a woman. So if you want to go back to that one, I'm going to reference both of these below. Today, we have a new face. This is Seb. This is Dr. Allie's husband, and he specializes in neurodivergence and that kind of a conversation in relationships as well as in sex. And we are going to explore that today. So today we are going to be talking about neurodiverse relationships, specifically ADHD and autism, and the impact of catastrophizing, shame spiraling, and rejection sensitivity, which feels like lots of boxes. I feel like applies to myself too. So Seb, because we don't know you, would you take just a minute and help us get to know you quickly with what's your background? Why are you here? Why are you an expert in neurodivergence? Talk to us.
Great question. Yeah, I have been, I would say, a both relationship and neurodiversity nerd for about at least 2 decades. And it's been just my primary passion to explore and learn and understand both myself and the people I've been working with. So I've worked with neurodiverse folks, specifically autistic people of all ages, for about 20 years. And then I identify as having ADHD. And I think there's something so fascinating about the different ways that the brain can express itself. And in my own life journey, I think there was just such relevant information to find about how to thrive both in life, in the world, and also in relationships by understanding the way that my brain specifically functions and works best. And that kind of directed me into that passion 20 years ago and has continued to evolve and adapt to the point where now I get to be doing this lovely work with my wife, Dr. Allie, and we get to be supporting folks in relationship and with intimacy and both on the spectrum, ADHD, and all kinds of different ways.
How amazing to get to work beside your life partner in the same company, doing the same thing, but probably specializing in a little bit different things. That must feel really yummy. And I'm curious, like the first question that I have is, when were you diagnosed with ADHD? Like, is this something that's kind of recent? Because all my friends are recently like, oh my God, now I know what's wrong with me. Like, now I know why I can't concentrate. Or is this something that you have just known for 2 decades or more?
Yeah, more.
Okay.
I'm one of those fun people who back in the 90s was, I think, kind of singled out as like, there's something about the way he reads and runs around the classroom and causes, it's kind of the classic kind of stereotype of an ADHD kid. And so I got tested, I think when I was about 10, and came back with high scores that were clear.
Awesome.
So I resonate with the many of my friends and community are like, I just found out. And the kind of late diagnosis, adult diagnosis is such a current wave of a movement, really.
Yes, and I want to come right back to that, but I have a question for Dr. Allie. So your husband mentioned you're neurospicy. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that, just so we know what kind of stuff we have going on here in our conversation that you're adding, to our conversation?
I'm neurotypical, and I think one of the important parts of the conversation that we want to talk about today is how neurotypical folks and neurodivergent partners can rub up against each other in certain ways, and what are the tools and practices that really help people with different types of brains maintain intimacy and take advantage of each other's strengths and also help each other with our weaknesses. And I think there's so many superpowers that people who are neurodivergent have that I think is oftentimes a missing part of the conversation.
Mm.
And so I want to highlight that just as much as what do Seb and I do in our relationship, and what do we do with our clients when the different ways that our brains work can be kind of frustrating sometimes. And that said, while I am definitely neurotypical, I am also highly sensitive. So there are certain aspects of folks who are neurodivergent that I really resonate with. And I think it is helpful to have these identifications. It's helpful to have these diagnoses. It's great for being able to find community and resources and support and medical aid and all of that. And I think sometimes we think of these boxes as very rigid. And I think that there's a lot of ways. I mean, even when we're talking about catastrophizing, shame spiraling, rejection sensitivity, every human, no matter if you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, can experience these dynamics and can feel really frustrated and challenged by them. And the way that they show up for folks who are neurodivergent can be different and, of course, can be more overwhelming and oppressive.
Okay. I think we should start out by identifying what is neurotypical versus neurodivergent. What do these terminologies mean?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that neurotypical is a brain that functions within the expected parameters of society.
Mhm.
Obviously, this can be different for different societies, but there's an orientation that there will be executive function capacities so that prefrontal cortex is going to be accessible consistently and predictably to guide us through working through all of the challenges and obstacles and problems to solve that come up inevitably throughout the day. And neurodivergent is just anything that diverges from that window of societal expectations of brain function. So it's actually a very wide umbrella that covers so many different things from ADHD, autism, OCD, mental illness, different, um, yeah, different personality disorders, all kinds of different things.
Okay, so there's neurotypical and there's neurodivergent, and you're in one of these paths. Your brain either operates as whatever normal, I don't want to use the word normal, but as it should. I don't know how to say that in the
Yeah,
correct term. Okay. And then there's neurodivergent, which is all the other neurospicy fun stuff that's out there right now. Okay, cool. That we have identified. Okay, so now my next question is what percentage of the population is this neurospicy, neurodivergent?
yeah, that's a great question and a little difficult to answer in 2026 currently
Mm,
because it's changing so fast. Statistically, currently, it's between 15 and 20% of the general population identifies as neurodivergent. And that is talking about a diagnosis. And so there's a huge gap right now in the percentage of people who have an official diagnosis and the percentage of people who maybe identify as neurodivergent and haven't pursued a diagnosis for various reasons, maybe financial barriers or different priorities, lots of different reasons people do or don't pursue a diagnosis. But we can see maybe in the younger generation where maybe Gen Z has grown up with more normalization of this kind of identity and
mhm.
different way of being, that they have come up with more self-identification of neurodiversity where you get a percent closer to around 40 to 50% of those individuals.
Mhm.
So it's hard to fully know,
Mhm.
but in terms of diagnosis, about 15 to 20%.
Yeah, I know at least in the last 5 years, almost every single friend of mine or person that's worked for me even is some sort of neurospicy. And it's fascinating to watch all of this unfold. I guess one of my questions too would be like, how do you know if you are? Like Scott and were seeing this woman a few weeks ago and we were at dinner and she was like, I'm ADHD and I have autism and I have this and I have that. And she was like, and Jen, you do too. And I was like, what? So I'm wondering if even some of us that are not like we think we're neurotypical, but we're not, like, how do you even know? And I feel like this is going to be important as we carry this on to this conversation, which is why I'm kind of sticking here for a minute, because it might actually make a difference in this is why your love life feels frantic, or this is why your sex is not working, or so help me, like, what are some indicators like you might be neurospicy and you might be telling yourself that you're not? And it's cool if you are, but like, here's some things you might want to be aware of that are indicators.
Yeah, that's a great question. I can it's a complicated one to answer,
I
but my
know.
best shot would be to even listening to this podcast.
Okay.
I think things are going to resonate and things aren't. You find yourself when Dr. Ali and I are sharing, being like, oh my God, that speaks so deeply to this experience I've lived with forever. That's kind of maybe a get your spidey senses tingling.
Okay.
And there's an element to it that's, does it impact your capacity to function, right? I think there's such a relevant layer of understanding that a lot of these qualities or symptoms are universal, ubiquitous. We all maybe have, as Dr. Ali said, some experience of shame spiraling, for example. But if it is so prevalent that it impacts your capacity to have healthy relationships or maintain a job or do well in school or hang on to friendships or get the laundry done, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a sort of an element of disability that is kind of controversial to acknowledge, but is also important to honor that there is a real impact on the ability to function. And so if that feels like a part of your reality, then yes, I think going to do research, there's lots of tests online, give or take how good they are. Obviously, official diagnosis is a route to explore. Yeah, maybe my first take.
And what I would just add is of the clients that we have and also our personal relationships with friends and community, when somebody gets a diagnosis, it's oftentimes what we hear is, oh, it makes so much sense, or it feels so seen or so understood, or of course, or they're able to relate to some of their past experiences in a way that feel normalized or explains why they struggled in the ways that they struggled, and that's one of the reasons, whether it's a self-identification or a medical diagnosis, can be really empowering, is because all of a sudden you can make sense of your experiences in a new way that feels like, oh, of course, now I get it. And of course, it's also a pathway to finding community, which can also feel really supportive.
Yeah, and targeted support.
Yes,
Yeah.
perfect. Okay, great. Okay. This feels so good. Okay, so we're going to wade a little bit more into the water. Seb, would
Mm.
you talk to us about ADHD and autism? And for those that are listening that maybe aren't sure, like which one's which or how this all works. And now I'm seeing ADHD U or AU, like they're combining them.
ADHD.
Yeah, can you help me understand, help us understand before we go even
Sure.
deeper? Okay.
Yeah. So ADHD is, it used to have just ADD and ADHD, and now it's all under the umbrella of ADHD. And there's three types: inattentive, hyperactive, impulsive, and mixed. And so inattentive might be that one that's more of the space cadet, that loves to just wander off in imagination or zone out as a comfort mechanism.
Mm,
The hyperactive is the like fidgety, need to move, gotta like can't sit still for too long, starts to deal with a lot of anxiety in their body. And then obviously mixed is a combination of the two. That's sort of the DSM version. I think within that, there's a lot of outside the DSM stuff that people are exploring around kind of hyper focus and the dopamine seeking intensity, kind of searching for strong input. Maybe adrenaline junkies are what you might think about. There can be challenges with drug use, right? Because there's a desire to have more intense input and stimulation all the time. And then I would say autism is a spectrum, but when we say spectrum, I prefer to think about it like a whole circle, and each part of the circle, there's different qualities and personality traits and different types of challenge or strengths that are dynamic. So someone on the spectrum may be nonverbal in one moment of intense trigger, but may then be really verbal in a moment where they're really regulated and feel really safe and are talking about their special interest, right? So that special interest is often like an area or a subject or a topic that they just find super regulating and soothing to focus on and enjoy, and also maybe there's different objects or movement patterns that feel very regulating. There's called stimming, self-stimulation. So different ways of regulating the body and nervous system through repetitive patterns and movements, or even sounds and words. So some folks really love like one Disney character and can recite each word that Disney character has said in that character's voice in a way that when they do that, they get super happy and regulated and comforted, as an example. One thing to note about autism, maybe two things to note, are in this conversation, we're using identity first language, which is an autistic person versus person first, person with autism, which is a little controversial, and different people have different takes on which is the best one to use. We use identity first because the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network and that community have decided that feels like the best term for them, which is basically the difference is that someone who is saying autistic is saying this is a part of who I am. I'm not separable from autism. You can't cure the autism in me. You can't take it away from me with medication or therapies. You can reduce impacts. You can reduce challenges and struggles, but I will always be autistic and I'm proud, and that's part of who I am. Versus person with autism is coming from this is something that is a mental illness or a diagnosis that is not my essential nature of who I am. So people have different opinions about that, and it's always best to ask what language people prefer on an individual basis. And then the second one I wanted to touch on is just for folks who are assigned female at birth, autism and ADHD show up really differently. And there's a lot of emerging kind of evidence and information that's still very new in the scientific community about how it shows up in women and girls and people just assigned female at birth. Because
hold on, now I feel like you need to drop into that for just a second, because there's probably a lot of us out there like, I think I'm really normal, but I don't know. Yeah. So how does it show up for women?
Yeah. So part of, I think, the reality for women's brains and girls' brains is that there's a higher capacity to socialize, to mask, and to understand emotions. There's, for whatever reason, there's an ability to be more emotionally intelligent and attuned in a way that when we've done research over the past 50 plus 70 years about autism and ADHD, we've used those things as the target identifiers of if you can't fit in socially or you don't understand emotions in this way, you must be neurodivergent. So for women and girls, they're like, I have those skills. Maybe I'm good at this. Maybe I'm so skilled at masking, but something internally still feels so divergent and confusing and disoriented and
Mm.
stressful to do that. There's an immense labor in showing up that way in masking that it's easy to miss. So there's a lot of undiagnosed or misdiagnosed women and girls. Dr. Ali, if you have anything to add.
Well, I'll just say what masking is the ability to, as it suggests, put on a mask,
Mm.
hide, obscure the challenge and the struggles that you're going through, do, as Seb said, an immense amount of emotional labor to fit in. And some people are better at masking than others, but I think one of the things that's important to note is that there's a real emotional toll, not only because it takes a lot of effort, but because it feels inauthentic, it feels disconnecting. It can lead to nervous system overwhelm and burnout. And so yeah, masking is an important thing to be able to do in certain situations, but it does come with a toll.
I'm sitting here like this just sounds like women in general. But maybe that's because that's my own experience and this is what I've done. Okay, this makes sense. Okay,
We
so
all mask, right? We all
all
have
men.
experiences of
Mhm.
masking, right? Almost everything that we're talking about, every human can relate to in certain situations. But
Mhm.
for folks who are on the spectrum, or folks who have ADHD, or folks who have both, the the occurrence of it is more frequent. The challenge around it is more intense.
Mm.
The perceived cost of not being able to do it well is really difficult. So
Mhm.
when we're talking about catastrophizing, shame, spiraling, rejection sensitivity, every human can relate to it. But because of the accumulation of life experiences somebody who is neurodivergent has had, the ways that that has resulted in social ostracization, the ways that that has resulted in being told that they're not doing it right or being punished or all of the other consequences they have with having a neurodivergent brain that has to function in a neurotypical world, they're going to be more hypervigilant and more sensitive and more impacted. And thus, they're going to be quicker to go to catastrophizing and shame spiraling and feel rejection sensitivity. And the impact of that is going to be far more disruptive.
I would also imagine that it would be exhausting, like purely
Yes.
exhausting to try to pretend all day that you're normal. Okay, cool. You guys have taken us to, I think, the juicy part, which is the application piece. So now we understand like what percentage of our world, or at least in the US, I don't know about the rest of the world, is, walking around with neurospiciness and what it's like to have to operate that way. And I love that the two of you are on these different sides of the spectrum because you can show us in real life examples of so here's my question. How does this work in marriage? How does this
Mhm.
show up in relationship? Like, I'm sure most of us can raise our hand and go, either I'm the spicy one or my partner is the spicy one, which is my partner. So I'm really curious how do we see it? How do we navigate with it? When we talk about catastrophizing and shame spiraling and rejection sensitivity, and we're not even talking about the layer of trauma, which I feel like might be part two podcast. Like that could be a whole nother hour or two to layer on the fucking
Yes.
trauma on top of all this shit. So maybe we
Well,
just
and
try
not
to
just
go
not
ahead.
just that, but Sebastian and I teach a three-part workshop series.
Ugh.
One is on executive function, one is on emotional intimacy, and one is on sexual intimacy for folks who are on the spectrum and with ADHD and their partners, if their
Hmm.
partners are neurodivergent or neurotypical. And so when you're asking, for example, how it impacts us,
Hmm.
we could take a slice from any one of those workshops. We could talk about how we manage tasks at home and how we have to be really thoughtful about delegation and what happens when Seb has a hard time tracking things and how that impacts me. Or, that's really coming from our executive function part of the
Hmm.
workshop. With emotional intimacy, I would say I'm very, very, very lucky, very grateful that Seb has done a tremendous amount of psychoeducation and comes into our relationship even before we were married incredibly equipped. I felt more met emotionally in this partnership than I have in any other relationship, romantic or platonic, in my life. And so I think that there's a lot of ways that maybe his ex-wife or other people in his world would be able to offer a different window into some of the challenges that I feel like I'm just getting a really evolved human
version
that
of him.
yeah, yeah.
I have to stop you, but carry on.
And then when it comes to the sexual stuff, I would say, I maybe even have more challenges than Seb does with some of the sensory sensitivities. And even though I'm neurotypical, I just have a really intense sensory sensitivities. And in part, that's, I think, because I navigate a lot of chronic pain and a lot of migraines, and I'm just, hypersensitive. And so it's interesting that we're talking about these things as these are things folks who are neurodivergent struggle with and things that neurotypical people can learn how to support them with. But in our relationship, and I think as you would find in most relationships, it's so individualized what actually shows up as a challenge point and for whom.
Well, I feel like she just gave us a three-pronged approach of how to tackle the next part of this conversation. Do you guys want to talk about what it's like to be just living in partnership with someone who is neurospicy versus neurotypical? And I'm sure there's things that drive you a little crazy about both of each other, like both parts of that. Like, why do you listen? My husband's always like, I don't understand why you don't just understand me. And I'm like, go ahead. I'm going to toss the baton to you too. That should be fun.
Sure. Yeah. Gosh, there's so many different directions to go. I think there's an element to it that, as Dr. Ali is talking about here, that's like when we're at our best versus when we're at our worst. And it's a very different expression, right? And I think because we've done this amount of personal growth work, when we're at our worst, we can come to those moments with some space and compassion, and we have this bevy of tools that we can pull from. Eventually, maybe it takes a moment. We're not perfect, and there's a lot of still growth to do always. But I think when we're kind of cruising and really thriving together, we're able to really understand how maybe we can be neurodivergent mindful in relationship, right? How we can be aware that these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, and let's structure things to minimize the negative impacts on both of us. And let's optimize Allie's strengths for ways that it can really take stress off of me. So one of the big themes that we've come to and that the workshop series talks about is how can we minimize executive function stress on a neurodivergent mind? Because the executive function stress of that prefrontal cortex that's used for organizing and tracking and complex problem solving is strained, right? There's less just actual energy going to that part of the brain. And so to constantly use that in relationship can take a lot extra unseen labor that eventually will lead to resentment and burnout and trigger and collapse. So how can we organize our relationship both practically and emotionally to be sensitive to that, right?
So I'm going to jump in here.
Yeah.
I think when we first started dating, one of the tension points would be, especially when we started living together and we had to manage life together, and actually even more especially when we started working together, would be that I felt like I had to track many, if not most things that I was putting, and that's in a lot of unseen labor of having to hold all of that and remembering it and yes, that's a place where maybe I excel more than Seb, but there definitely were points where I felt resentment, especially when I would pass the baton to him and he would drop it or he would forget. And so some of the things that we really worked on is, and this wasn't the case when we first started dating, is Seb has a to-do list. And when I ask him to do something, he knows I need to put it on my to-do list immediately or I will forget. We do team meetings often. So once a week, we'll meet and we'll talk about what's actually the priority, whether it's for the day or for the week, because I think sometimes that's a challenge point for him is to be able to identify priorities. One thing that we do is we do a lot of calendaring together, and we're really big on having shared calendars and to be able to know that if it's not in the calendar, that there's kind of the fail safe of like it's on the to-do list, but it's also in the calendar. And then what that has done is that means that he's dropping balls less and I'm not having to hold all the things I'm tracking plus all the things I'm tracking for him.
Yeah.
I freaking love this. Can I just jump in here for a minute? Because my husband's like, I don't need to know what's on the calendar. You'll just remind me 12 times. And I'm like, that's a lot to hold. Like, I need you to fucking remember that we have a
Mhm.
date with XYZ person on Friday at 7 o'clock and you need to be ready because we're leaving
Yeah.
at 6:45 and it's on your calendar. So I love this idea of like, Seb, when you got your to-do list, did that
Yeah.
feel degrading in any way or did that feel helpful?
It's a great question. It's something that we still navigate and talk about often. Just the reality is there's times, depending on how kind of grounded and regulated I am, where that extra reminder, that extra check-in is super appreciated and welcome. But times where I'm like really doing well, I'm kind of I get frustrated. I'm like, I got this. Like, stop
Mm,
asking me. You already asked me 3 times. Um, and yeah, I think the structural changes that help support are not degrading for me. They feel very empowering, and they when they actually create positive results
mhm,
of lessening stress internally and lessening friction relationally, then absolutely there's no fear or stress or degradation, whatever, about how I feel about those structures. They're just like, oh my God, something that helps. I think it's
mhm,
so for many neurodivergent people, we maybe relate to the feeling of I've tried everything and nothing works, or no matter how much effort I put in to remembering this thing, I still just make mistakes. And that kind of connects to that feeling of potential rejection, sensitivity dysphoria, and the fear of failure or the fear of criticism, right? Because if we're in relationship and we're constantly feeling criticized for not doing it right or remembering a thing or being enough,
mhm,
um, then we develop a sort of internal protection mechanism of shut down, collapse, or push away and
mhm,
protect because it's so painful to be constantly reminded. And it's like maybe not even actually being told you're not enough or you dropped this ball, how could you? Maybe it's just the perception of that is creating this internal collapse response or internal kind of painful experience. So anything that helps that, I'm like super hungry for. If it actually works, if it's actually effective.
How do you like to get your to-do list? Is it like a
Hmm.
sticky note? Do
Yeah,
you
great
think like
question.
things to cross off manually or do you like it like on an iPhone?
There's so many apps now, and people have all their different ways, and maybe I'm just kind of old school, but I usually use the Notes app on my phone,
Hmm.
and I have 3 different categories. One that's like really priorities, top priorities, and then secondary priorities, and then longer term tertiary priorities. So things that I'm like, they don't need to happen this week or this month even, but I don't want to lose track of them are down in that bottom list. Things that I'm like, oh, I can't forget this. This is like focus on really make sure I'm tracking it is at the top. And that's really worked well for me.
And you
Um,
remember to look at it like throughout the day? You're
yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
that's part
you've
of the
trained yourself.
that's exactly that's um, part of the learning and the changing of behavior that I think is really hard with a lot of the tips and tools, both from this workshop series that we teach, but I think in really any relational work is like we can learn the tools and the tips, but actually putting them into practice
Hmm.
and making a long-term behavioral change is a whole other ball game. And that's when you ask if those reminders are degrading for me, you know, they're really not, because I feel often when Allie asks me to do something or to remember to track something, and then she checks in if I did it or not, it's just her being on my team and being an ally in this way. That's not, there's a big difference between an asking about it from resentment or judgment and support. So when I feel her asking and just checking in, I feel so held and cared for.
And that's what I was just about to jump in and add. I think so much of it comes with my attitude that I'm holding. And there are times where maybe I'm stressed and dysregulated or going through a hard time. I'm not my best self. And yeah, I'll be grumpy or short or frustrated or irritated. But most of the time, the way that I hold it is we are on the same team. And I want to be able to give positive reinforcement. I want to celebrate. I want to witness. I want to acknowledge. Seb actually, I want to make sure it's clear here. He pulls a huge amount of weight in our relationship. What I'm talking about here isn't about distribution of labor. It's about the functioning around the labor. It's the tracking, it's the remembering, it's the knowing the right priorities. So there is zero resentment I have about Seb pulling his weight. I mean, there are many times that he pulls far more weight than I do. And in terms of our life functioning, of making things happen so that our home and our life run smoothly. But I think, yeah, it's the seeing, it's the witnessing, it's a positive reinforcement. I remember when Seb first started his to-do list, in the calendar every morning, it said check to-do list. And that was just to be able to have it doesn't say that anymore. He doesn't need that. But then I would also see it in the calendar and it'd say, hey, babe, did you remember to check your to-do list for today? Versus, did you check your to-do list? You know, it's the tone, the attitude that you hold. And a lot of it is about asking for consent too. So saying something like, would it be helpful to look at your to-do list together? Not let's look at your to-do list together, or have you figured out your priorities, but just like, hey, would it be helpful? Do you want any feedback? Do you want to chat through it? And I think that that's also a way to just like really lift somebody up rather than have it feel like a nagging parental dynamic, which is something that we've both been very resistant and conscious to not create.
Yeah, you're so good at softening a question or a response or like a request. I know because now this is my third podcast with you. And there's something I can feel the energetics even just like across, I don't know how many states we are, but like when you talk like that, I'm like, yes, I want to show you my to-do list. I want to be a good girl and show you about my to-do list. I did it. So to me, we're just talking about communication and really helpful ways to get shit done as a couple and do it in a soft and encouraging way. So I guess I have one last question about this, then I have more questions about communication in different areas. But Dr. Ali, did you come to Seb with the like, hey, maybe we should do a to-do list request? And if so, like, how does that conversation go so that you don't feel like you're mothering your partner? Or was that something that you came up with?
I think I have a vague memory of, yeah, having a conversation. We used to do them a lot more often than we do right now, but we do relationship check-in conversations. And so just having a conversation where I said, I have a withhold. I have been feeling some resentment because I feel like I'm having to track a lot of things for both of us. And I've been in some positions where I haven't wanted to nag, but then I don't remind you, and then it doesn't happen, and then I feel regret around not reminding you, and I just don't know how to navigate this because I don't want to feel resentment. I don't want you to feel controlled, and I want to figure out a different way that we can collaborate so that it actually feels more useful for both of us. And then we talked about it together because there's not a one size fits all scenario. Even if we had already created these workshops and when we're teaching them, I wouldn't just apply what we talk about at face value, because certain things that we talk about would work really well for us and certain things that we talk about wouldn't be the right thing for us, right? And so we came at it collaboratively. We talked about, and it's trial and error. We tried this, that didn't quite work. We tried that didn't quite work.
Yeah.
Until we figured it out.
Okay, I like I like your approach. So this is what is on my mind as we're rolling through these conversations is difficult conversations that need to be had that you don't want to have face to face. So like my partner is like a marinator, and I'm more like, let's throw it all out and talk about it, like, like gladiator style. Like, let's just go for it, and he's like, whoa, that's a lot to think about. Can I just have a moment? So I'm curious how you guys handle those kind of big things. Like, for example, I'll give you an example of ours. We might have had a disagreement about something, and I feel like he kind of like boiled over when I was trying to be neutral about it, and it really hurt me. So I would go to bed, and I don't want to go to sleep without some sort of at least explaining how I felt or like trying to reach a resolution. So I might send it to him in a text message or put it in a Telegram thread where, like, I'm really not okay the way that this ended. And here's why it hurt me. And here's, previously how we've handled this kind of thing. And I don't understand why it had to blow up. And like, what's really beneath the surface for you? Can you kind of marinate on that for a few days and come back to me? So that I'm not confrontational, because confrontational I found does not work. So I'm really curious in that kind of situation, if you guys even have that, maybe you don't. I feel like most of us do. Like, how do you guys handle that from neurotypical versus neurodivergent way?
Yeah, that's a great question. And just thinking about this podcast, one of the things that came to mind for me was like this rabbit hole I would be tempted to go down of like the art of taking space and how to take space well. Because I think for folks like me, or maybe your husband, there can be an intense aversion to the moment of gladiator confrontation.
Yeah.
And especially if it's unexpected and sort of out of nowhere, it can be a jolt to the nervous system,
Yeah.
and just like really too much too soon to try and process and show up well for. And so there's like I need to get the fuck out of here.
Hmm.
It's okay that I swore.
Totally. Run, eject, get me the
Yeah,
fuck out
yeah,
of here.
go, go, go.
Absolutely. That's what happens.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. And so then what happens after that, right? If we're allowing for that or making space for that, first off, we always suggest like communicate how long that is going to be,
Okay.
right? So not just leaving the person uh, in this sort of nebulous unknown of how long this space will be. And you just have to now sort of sit and wait until some unknown time. If maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe it's 2 days, um, till it's going to be kind of reconnected with and brought up. So give some clear information of like, I'm going to come back in 15 minutes, and maybe 15 minutes passes and I'm still not ready. I'm still going to come back and say, hey, I know it's been 15 minutes, so I just wanted to let you know I need more time, right? Maybe I need to talk about this tonight.
That's the difference between taking space and abandoning
Hmm.
or pushing away. Is really saying, I'm going to take this space so that I can show up for this conversation in a way that I'm going to feel good about, and that's going to be really supportive of the repair that I know we need to do. And again, as Seb said, I think it's so important to honor that you need to regulate your nervous system to be able to do that well.
Hmm.
And that means when you're taking space, doing it intentionally, doing the types of things that are going to help you come back into your window of tolerance so that you can have these sensitive conversations. For me, that's oftentimes taking a really long hot shower. Sometimes it's going out and being in the sun or taking a walk or being in the redwoods, or for some people, it's going to be punching a punching bag or getting on the treadmill and running as fast as they can. There's not a one size fits all, but really knowing that you're doing the kinds of things that help you burn some of that intense energy that you're feeling so that you can come back. And one of the things that we always say is you should be able to access curiosity and empathy. That's the metric that you're looking for to know that you're ready to come back and have these sensitive conversations. And sometimes that might actually mean that you need to process out, calling a friend or a therapist or a family member, somebody that you can vent to or talk about, or have them help you see it from your partner's perspective, and to be able to do that perspective taking. But if I can't come to the conversation ready to be a little softer, to be curious about what his experience is, to be able to empathize with his experience, realizing that there's no one objective truth. There's his experience and there's my experience, and our goal is to understand each of those and to be able to validate both of them.
And I might be able to come to Allie gladiator style, like, let's go. Where
Yeah.
Seb, you probably wouldn't appreciate that. Maybe you would, I don't know. But how do we just come to our partners that are neurospicy in a way that doesn't trigger the fuck out of them? Like you guys mentioned that you have, this process of doing a checklist and that feels kind of unobtrusive and like, cool, you have your list, go do your thing. But when you need to have a really hard conversation, or you need to tell your person something that they're like having a really hard time listening to, but they need to know what you're thinking and they need to process it on their own. How do you two deal with that? Or how do you recommend to your clients that they deal with it?
You want to
I
take
guess
it?
I'll talk about it. Sure. Yeah, I think there's not going to be a one size fits all answer for that because it
Okay.
depends on so many factors. If it's a time sensitive thing, then you know Allie's not going to have the luxury of waiting until the perfect moment, right? Like often on a hike, it's a great time for us to talk about hard stuff because we're moving our bodies, we're out in nature, there's a lot of resourcing external factors that are really helpful too, and we feel spaciousness, right? Um, Timing is a really relevant thing if it's something that you have capacity to choose to wait until a good kind of preferred moment of someone's regulation patterns,
Hmm.
that's great. But sometimes you don't have that, and it's just in this moment, I'm really hurt and upset. Um, Gladiator armor is on, and we need to do it right now. And in those cases, I think there's some kind of basic strategies of separating the emotional from the practical. A
Hmm.
lot of neurodivergent folks, and just pretty much everybody, really has a hard time sticking with the emotional part of a
Hmm.
conversation. And we jump to what did you do, or what did I do, or what should we do to fix this? And that will make your feeling go away, right? If I
Hmm.
can just change whatever the situation was or your understanding of what happened, then you're not going to feel this way and I'm not in trouble anymore.
Hmm.
And that is the worst response to a partner bringing up, I feel some big thing that needs attention, right? That is going to create so much friction because you're going to be like, you're not hearing me. You're not making space for the emotion that needs attention first right now. I'm upset. I'm impacted by something that needs to be addressed. And we get confused when she's like, oh, it needs to be addressed. Great. I can fix it. I'm a fixer. No problem. Right. But can we slow down and be with that emotional layer of the process before switching to and being really explicit and naming? I think the person who's bringing that gladiator moment can say, hey, this is what I need right now. I need you to just listen. You can ask me questions. I need you to be curious about what I'm saying. And I need you to really try and track the defensive mechanism or the shutdown response as best you can, right? And I need you to just empathize with my feelings right now instead of try and fix it. And giving that sort of explicit direction is such a generous, kind offer to a neurodivergent partner.
Hmm.
When we know what the instructions and expectations are, it's super orienting and helpful, right? Oh, please just tell me what you want from me and then I can adjust and plan on that.
Oh
Does that
my
make
God,
sense?
that needs to be a quote. Because I can imagine my husband saying that, like, just what is it that you want? And I'm like, you don't understand. Okay, this is so good. So I feel like we talked about just in the living situation how you guys manage life, and we talked about the to-do list, and then I threw in, well, what happens when you have something really hard that you need to bring up? I hope that didn't, I don't want that to be our piece of the three-pronged approach of relational. I'm sure you guys have probably a better example of relationally how you two, uh, you know, be in partnership together. Talk a little bit about that. Are there challenges? What are they?
Ye- Yeah, I mean, I think every couple has challenges, and some of our challenges are related to neurodivergence and the ways that we have different functioning brains, and some of them are just related to the fact that you have two humans who are living in close proximities, and for us who are not just living and cohabitating, but we're also working together and dealing with, just life isn't easy, right? Life is hard. You've got all sorts of things that are causing grief and health issues and these challenges and those challenges. And I think the reality is, and you could have me go off and off about what it's like to live in a late stage capitalist society in a two partnership family dynamic, when really I don't think our society is structured to support that. And then you've got the political climate, and you've got it's just there are so many factors that are going on right now that feel
Mhm.
exhausting, that lead to burnout, that have us not functioning at our best. And I get really irritable when I am past capacity. I can get really particular and nitpicky. That can get kind of collapsed and
Spacey.
really spacey, and has the tracking things that I was talking about are going to be exacerbated in these situations where he is going to be dropping more balls. And so I think it's just about what are the ways that Seth can say, you know what, I understand you're really going through a hard time, but I've been feeling really criticized and it's really starting to weigh on me and it's actually having me drop more balls. And I could say something like, you're right, like I have been really just navigating a lot and I haven't been doing really well. And I think that there's more sources of support that I can start to lean on and rely on so that I'm not taking it out on you because that's not fair to you. And so I think that these are just some of those conversations that every couple needs to have. And we're not in any way the exception. I think I don't know, Seb, is there anything on that you want to say?
Um, yeah, that seems pretty thorough.
Yeah. I think that there's ways that, we're not really struggling too much with catastrophizing and shame spiraling, rejection sensitivity in the scope of our relationship because we've really worked to have a secure dynamic and we've gone through a lot of challenges and they've always helped us deepen our intimacy and I think that there's a lot of security that comes from that. I think one of the challenge points that we actually experience that's a little bit more common is around some of the things around our sexual connection and the ways that I can be really sensitive to gosh, just about everything. Like the lighting has to be just right, and I need the right music. And if Seb's beard was shaved at a particular time and it's a little spiky, or like, sometimes too much saliva, sometimes not enough saliva, like just some of those particularities that we've really learned to work through. And I think regardless if it's emotional or executive functioning or sexual, I think one of the things that we've really learned to do well is to not personalize it. So if I'm feeling like things are just not feeling quite right, or I'm feeling a little frustrated because your beard is spiky or whatever it is, he doesn't internalize that and take it personally. He's really worked to not feel that kind of rejection sensitivity of I'm not attracted to him or I'm not interested in him. Or if I'm feeling like I need some emotional support and he's just past capacity or has been, running on fumes, I really work to not internalize that and take it personally that I'm too much. And to make sure that we're both really realizing that we are each other's number one support, but we can't be our only support. And how can we really diversify the ways that we're getting resourced and um, able to try our best to come to our relationship as equipped as possible.
Well, now you took us down the sex route. I'm like, okay, Seb, you guys don't have to share anything personal that you don't want to. We can always talk in generalities or with your own clients. But like, how does ADHD and autism show up in sex?
Oh, wow, such a massive question.
What does it look like?
Um, let's see if I can give a micro. description or explanation. Um, I would say for a lot of autistic folks, there can be some need for predictability. Sex can feel really overwhelming if it's unexpected, out of the blue, especially with libido in a long-term relationship. Um, if that's hard to access or it's not necessarily a preferred activity, or there's heightened sensitivities, then sort of the spontaneous sexual invitation can feel really dysregulating and stressful. And so maybe normalizing an approach that's more letting someone know, hey, I'm feeling horny for you and I would love to have some sexy time later tonight. And so that maybe I'm at work and I can reorient my energy use and my transition time to prepare to get into that kind of potential mood and see if I get more excited about it instead of having to just on the switch of a dime. Transitions are such a notoriously difficult area for autistic folks, and ADHD folks as well, but particularly folks on the spectrum can have a really hard time emotionally adjusting to something that's coming out of nowhere. And then also, how do we make accommodations for those sensitivities, right? So if maybe just using my facial hair as a nice example that we've found for sensory sensitivity is if I'm wanting to go down, or maybe Allie's wanting me to go down on her, usually it's me wanting to go down on her. We have found that putting a sheet in between my beard and her inner thigh, and then I can rest my head so that I can access her vulva from a place where she's not constantly bracing for, oh, is this like, am I going to be trying to open and also contract and protect against this uncomfortable sensation? Little hacks and adjustments and making accommodations like that okay and normal, right? Changing the lighting, being in a place with fidget toys or stim toys or like comfort objects, letting that be okay. For ADHD, a lot of what we talk about is how to both navigate kind of dopamine regulation, so like the desire for more intensity, especially in a long-term relationship, that can be very difficult when it becomes so familiar. Familiarity is sort of the eternal struggle and battle for the ADHD mind. Like I need novelty all the time. And so if my partner of however many years, I'm just like, we do the sex the same way all the time, then it starts to be less exciting and less interesting. So how can we keep things engaged and creative and spicy and maybe spontaneous and exploratory? And then also, how do we deal with potential attention challenges? So maybe, my partner to get aroused really needs time, and I'm like, I could jump in and finish in whatever, 5 minutes. And then that pattern over years is going to lead to a lot of dissatisfaction and what some may call the orgasm gap. So how can we adjust and make some accommodations to support the attention span, getting the attention it needs to maybe go through ebbs and flows of capacity, right? So maybe I'm noticing, oh, I'm going down on her and my attention is starting to wander because I'm tired or fatigued. I'm not going to try and blow past that or just give subpar oral sex. I'm going to name it and say, hey, do you mind if we shift for a minute into something more relaxing that I can stop using so much of my functioning capacity and build some kind of reserves up again. And then I'd love to go down on you again, right? So maybe we cuddle, maybe we do something just more relaxing and different.
Oh my God. We should have led with this because I have like 400 questions now. Okay. Man. Okay.
Maybe we need to do a part two.
Jesus Christ.
Trying to cover
We're
all
getting
the
hot over
categories. I
here.
don't think we even have gotten to rejection sensitivity
Jesus
much, but
Christ.
that's fine.
Okay. So like earlier today, Scott went down on me with his beard. So
Oh,
I'm like, Oh,
Uh,
I remember that feeling. Okay, that was great. Um, so I'm hearing if you know that your partner is somewhat autistic, somewhere on the spectrum, it's really helpful if you're feeling riled up to kind of give them a heads up. Or what you didn't say that I was thinking also was scheduling. Like maybe
mhm.
scheduling sex for an autistic person might be helpful. Is that true or not true?
We would never suggest scheduling sex.
Okay.
I think we both agree, but scheduling intimacy time. So like
Yes.
scheduling time to be intentional and see if any sexual intimacy feels accessible and available.
I love
Totally.
that. We actually talked
And
about this in episode 150. If you
Nice.
guys want to go
Okay.
click on the link
that's
below.
right. Yes, scheduling sex just results in pressure.
Yeah.
But making sure that you are prioritizing time for intimacy and letting somebody know. One of the things that I think can be really helpful too for somebody who is neurodivergent is um, by saying like, "Hey, if you're up for it, I'd love to have some time for intimacy tonight." They can then plan their resource management
Hmm.
differently.
Okay.
Like, I'm not going to blow my social load. I'm not going to go at max capacity. I'm not going to come home completely fried, if possible, so that I can have some left in the tanks to be able to be present with you, to be able to explore intimacy, which requires a certain level of resources. And so I think that plus for those of us that love anticipation, it can also be part of the turn on and build up.
I like that. I have a a friend who I had on the podcast like a year or so ago, and she doms her husband. But in order for her to get into that mindset, she needs to know it's happening. It has to be on the calendar. It's like one day a month on a certain date. And she's like, I read fucking spicy romance novels all day. I get myself off at lunch. Like, it's a build to get to that point where I feel that I can sustain a scene with him at night. And so I guess that's where I was kind of thinking about if it was on a calendar, would that be helpful? But I know that also feels like pressure and also can't isn't super fun for the person that wants spontaneousness. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a rabbit hole we could fall down is
I know,
the
I know, I know. Sorry.
tension between the structured and the spontaneous
I
is like
know.
a
Which leads us to
eternal battle.
ADHD. Yeah, which I love. I love that you
Yeah.
unravel that because I didn't think about that before. And I guess my experience with like women that we have been with that have ADHD and like they talk about it all the time, so I know that that's what's going on. And Allie, maybe you're the one to answer this. I don't know from a woman's point of view, but their struggle has really been like, I can't orgasm, especially with partners I barely know. Like I just sit here and I'm like, I can feel the temperature of the room. I can feel the breath on me. There's a beard on my left thigh. Like I am supposed to perform and make noises and I can't fucking come to save my life. And it's like so much in their brain. And so like how do you drop into your body from that? If you know your
Yeah.
partner is experiencing that, how do you get them down in their genitals? You know what I mean?
Well, things that we found helpful is erotica. And what we'll do is we'll find our favorite porns or written erotica. We love Literotica as a website
Hmm.
or sexy podcasts, whatever they are. We'll separate our let's find things we think are hot sessions from the we're trying to have some hot sexy time sessions so that you're not having to encounter all the things that you don't like when you're just trying to get off. And we have our little favorites list of things that we can just pull up. One of the things that we find really sweet in bonding is to read erotica to each other. That just feels really sweet and sexy.
Mm.
We'll use sex toys. The sex toy industry is a multi-billion-dollar industry for a reason. They have some of the
Mhm.
smartest people in the world. Do you think they're working on rocket science? They may be, but they're also working on our sex toys. And there are some incredible sex toys out there that can be really helpful for overcoming some of the emotional and physical blockages that we can feel that can get in the way of our libido. We will, as Seb kind of reference, allow for fidgets and stimming and other kinds of things. Seb has a bevy of fidget devices. He hates it when I call them fidget toys. He's got fidget devices. And I think like one of my personal kinks is I love having all kind of like some sex toys laid out by the bed when even if we don't use them at all, it's like a little bit of a medical kink. Like, you know how at the dentist office they have all the tools on the tray. It's like I want to have all of my tools of the trade on a tray, and then Seb will have his fidget devices, next to his bed, and it's just something about that that's normalizing and permission giving, and again, not to internalize it, not to personalize it. I don't feel like he's not into me or attracted or find me desirous because he needs to change things up, or because he wants to fidget, or because he's having a hard time staying present or staying focused, or he doesn't do that because I'm having sensory sensitivities. And part of that is just giving each other the reassurance. So I can say, I'm really into you. I'm just having a hard time with this sensation right now. Or he'll say, I'm so glad that we're making this deposit into our intimacy bank. I really love getting to be with your naked body in this way, and I'm noticing I need to change it up. And I think that just for the parts of us that can feel insecure, it really helps them quiet down.
So yummy. Okay, we're wrapping up this podcast. Did we miss anything we need to talk about? I don't think we did, at least for now. We can have 14 more podcasts. I know you guys love having Dr. Allie on. Now you're going to be like, I need Seb to come back and tell us more. I guess like close us out with, if someone's listening, or I'm sure lots of people that are listening are going to be like, wow, I need more of these two. I need their class. I need to have some, I don't know, one-on-one coaching and help me. Like, what do you recommend that people do as a next step, and how can they find you too?
You can go to our website, which is TurnON.love, and you can access our 3-part neurodivergent workshop series. You can rent them from home anytime, anywhere. We are also offering them a couple of times throughout the year if you want to take them either in person if you're in the Bay Area, or we also offer them on Zoom sometimes. You can work with either Seb or I. What's I think really unique about our coaching practice is we're working as a team. So even if you're only working with one of us, you're still getting resources and support and guidance in the background from both of us. But it's also not uncommon for our clients to do some sessions with both of us. And so I think that there's a real advantage there to getting to have us as a team. And we're offering both real experiential, practical tools and support, but also working with some of the deeper, more core material that can make it hard to actually implement those skills. Things like neurodivergence and our trauma histories and family and cultural and religious influences and our attachment systems and all of those things that can get in the way of having the kinds of emotional experiences and sexual interactions that we're wanting. We also offer just so many different courses and retreats. And one that I want to raise to the audience's attention, is we have a course for couples called Sustainable Intimacy, Fuel Passion for Lasting Love. And we offer it as a retreat. It's also available as an on-demand rental, but the next retreat is in April. And I think this is really good for couples who are wanting to keep the spark alive. Maybe they're not having as much sex as they want to be having. Maybe they're finding that they're having all sorts of emotional obstacles that are getting in the way of them having the kind of connection that they're wanting. But that's a wonderful resource as well if folks want to have some really deep quality drop-in connection time with both of us. So there's a lot. Go to our website. You'll see all the on-demand content. You'll see all the upcoming offerings, and you'll see how to reach out to us for coaching.
Perfect. Seb, you want to leave them with anything else?
I don't think so. I just so appreciate this time together and all of your wonderful questions. And yeah, it's an honor to get to join the two of you in your
Thank
your
you for
history.
being on. It was fun meeting you. And what a wonderful contribution you made today. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Open Bedroom Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, go ahead and give us a like and click subscribe below and stay up to date on all the new episodes that we release. If you have a topic that you'd really like more information on, leave us a comment below and we'll see what we can do. Feel free to share this podcast with all of your friends and especially your partners. This is a great way to open up some amazing conversations. We'll see you next week.